So let me thank you for the opportunity to talk about the biggest international story of your professional lifetime, which is also the most important international challenge the world will face for as far as the eye can see. The story, of course, is the rise of China. Never before have so many people risen so far, so fast, on so many different dimensions. The challenge is the impact of China's rise, the discombobulation this will cause the United States and the international order of which the U.S. has been the principal architect and guardian.
And so far, we have lost nobody to coronavirus in the United States.
Take it easy, just relax. Relax. We're doing great. It all will pass.
What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. But I would like to begin by announcing some important developments in our war against the Chinese virus. Because it comes from China.
Racist?
It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China. I want to be
accurate. In December 2019, China notified the World Health Organization of several cases of human respiratory illness, a disease later named COVID-19. The virus causing this disease is known as Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2.
The emergence of a previously unknown pathogen has taken a heavy toll on China. By the end of Thursday, the novel coronavirus disease has infected nearly 79,000 people on the mainland and killed some 2,700 of them. On February 23rd, Chinese President Xi Jinping stressed unremitting efforts in the prevention and control of the COVID-19 epidemic. This airport has received over 1,000 medical support charter flights and cargo flights since January 24th. A massive influx of medical staff and supplies has been pouring in Wuhan, the hardest hit city. East China's Jiangxi province sent its first batch of medical staff in late January. More than 300 medical teams, consisting of some 40,000 medical personnel, have been dispatched to Hubei from across China. Ensuring the provision of medical supplies in Wuhan and Hubei is prioritized. 19 provinces have paired with other cities in Hubei to provide one-on-one support. This is one of Wuhan's biggest temporary hospitals, accommodating some 3,500 beds for infected patients with mild symptoms. It took only 19 hours to pull all forces together to begin construction.
我们这都有400多人在同时施工，全国都在支援武汉，支援湖北，我们一定能赢。
In a short period of time, Wuhan builds 2 major makeshift hospitals, Hushenchan and Weishenchan, and converts many gyms, conference and exhibition centers into temporary hospitals for medical staff, construction workers, the community workers, and the general public. People from all walks of life are fighting on the front line of epidemic prevention and control.
信心百倍地打好这一场阻击战、总体战，打好这一场人民战争我们一定要树立信心，一定会胜利的。
总书记多次提起，人民群众共同抗击疫情，就是鼓励全国人民同心协力、英勇奋斗、共克时艰，一起决胜武汉、决胜湖北、决胜全国，来取得疫情防控斗争的全面胜利。
I spoke with President Xi. We had a great talk. He's working very hard, I have to say. He's working very, very hard. And if you can count on the reports coming out of China, that spread has gone down quite a bit. The infection seems to have gone down over the last 2 days.
Trump on Wednesday put his second-in-command, Mike Pence, in charge of the response to the looming global health crisis. He told people in the U.S. that the risk from the coronavirus remains, quote, very low. His comments come as public health officials warn Americans to prepare for more cases. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention confirmed a new infection. And a first for the country, it's believed that the patient has not traveled outside the U.S. or been exposed to a person known to have the virus.
Take it easy, just relax. That's really bad reporting. All these empty, these in-between chairs. Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all. I think we've done a great job.
Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. Coronavirus. And this is their new hoax. And I was shocked to hear it. 35,000 people on average die each year from the flu. And so far, we have lost nobody to coronavirus in the United States.
Take it easy, just relax. Relax. We're doing great. It all will pass. The same vaccine could not work. You take a solid flu vaccine, you don't think that would have an impact or much of an impact on corona? No. I have to say, I think with social distancing that the media has been much nicer. I don't know what it is, all these empty, these in-between chairs.
What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. Go ahead. I think it's a very nasty question. Let me just tell you something. That's really bad reporting. You gotta be ashamed of yourself.
The units that
I would like to begin by announcing some important developments in our war against the Chinese virus. Because it comes from China. It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China. I want to be accurate. We're at war. In a true sense, we're at war. And we're fighting an invisible enemy. Think of that. I'm a wartime president. This is a war. It's the invisible enemy. That's always the toughest enemy, the invisible enemy, but we're going to defeat the invisible enemy, and it will be a complete victory. It'll be a total victory. This will help our economy, and you will see our economy skyrocket once this is over. I think it's going to skyrocket. It's a pent-up demand. It's a built-up demand, and I guess you really have to say who knows, but I think it's going to be a tremendous day when we win this war, and we will win the war.
Dr. Fauci said earlier this week that the lag in testing was, in fact, a failing. Do you take responsibility for that?
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it a 10. I think we've done a great job.
Tonight, I can report the sky is absolutely falling. We are all doomed. The end is near. The apocalypse is imminent, and you're going to all die. Or at least that's what the media mob would like you to think.
Yeah, I'm dead right on this. The coronavirus is the common cold, folks. The hype of this thing as a pandemic, as the Andromeda strain, as, oh my God, if you get it, you're dead.
This is one of those cases where the more I learn about coronavirus, the less concerned I am. There's a lot of hyperbole.
The national left-wing media playing up fears of the coronavirus.
The sky is falling because we have a few dozen cases of coronavirus on a cruise ship. I am far more concerned with stepping on a used heroin needle than I am getting the coronavirus, but maybe that's just me.
It's a virus, like the flu. All the talk about coronavirus being so much more deadly doesn't reflect reality.
This virus should be compared to the flu because at worst case scenario, it could be the flu.
The far more deadly, more lethal threat right now is not the coronavirus. It's the ordinary old flu. People are dying right now. Nobody has died yet in the United States, as far as we know, from this disease.
That's right.
And the facts are actually pretty reassuring, but you never know it watching all this stuff.
You want to know how I really feel about the coronavirus, Juan? If I get it, I'll beat it. I'm not afraid of the coronavirus, and no one else should be that afraid either.
It is very, very difficult to contract this virus.
It's milder than we thought. The fatality rate is going to drop.
So when you hear the context, it's not quite as scary.
It's actually the safest time to fly. Everyone I know that's flying right now, terminals are pretty much dead. And then the planes, remember back in the day when you had a seat next to you possibly empty, you could stretch out a little more? It's like that on every flight now.
One of the things you can do if you're healthy, you and your family, it's a great time to just go out, go to a local restaurant.
Yeah.
Likely you can get in easily.
Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz mocked concerns about the spread of the virus by wearing a gas mask on Capitol Hill.
When a reporter in the Capitol asked Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma, 85, what precautions he was taking, he extended his arm with confidence. Want to shake hands?
In our line of work, you shake hands. I expect the president will continue to do that. I'll continue to do it.
We have contained this. We have contained this. I won't say airtight, but pretty close to airtight.
It is being contained. And do you not think it's being contained?
0 people in the United States of America have died from the coronavirus. 0.
This is a flu. This is like a flu. It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
As of April 1st, the US has more than 189,000 coronavirus cases and more than 4,000 deaths, becoming the world's most infected country.
Meanwhile, China seems to have been successful in containing the virus, with the WHO representative of the country stating that, quote, it is an epidemic that has been nipped as it was growing and stopped in its tracks. This is very clear from the data that we have, as well as the observations that we see in society in general.
They're sick and in urgent need of a doctor. The emergency room hospital inundated with coronavirus patients, no available beds. They arrive early in the morning to wait in line to try to get seen. Inside Elmhurst Hospital, medical staff struggle to keep people alive. In one 24-hour period, 13 people died of COVID-19. The hospital has 500 beds and is over capacity.
All the patients in this room, all the feet that you see, they all have COVID.
A nurse shared video with the New York Times, a glimpse of what it's like inside.
The U.S. now has more reported cases of the coronavirus than any other country in the world. Think about that for just a second. There are more than 85,000 across all 50 states. The death toll is about 1,300. There are stay-at-home orders in at least 23 different states.
New York City remains the national epicenter of the pandemic. It has more than a quarter of those sickened so far, and this is overwhelming the city's hospitals and first responders.
Dr. Fauci said earlier this week that the lag in testing was, in fact, a failing. Do you take responsibility for that?
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it at 10. I think we've done a great job. To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency. Two very big words. Again, we don't want everybody taking this test. It's totally unnecessary. And this will pass. I'm also hopeful to have Americans working again by that Easter, that beautiful Easter day.
America is now the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic.
America has passed the grim milestone of 20,500 deaths to overtake Italy as the world's worst hit nation.
Many blame the president for the scale of the crisis.
These are the lonely times for a president. All the decisions come to you, and he's made just about all of them wrong.
Get easy, just relax. That's really bad reporting. Where are the masks going? Are they going out the back door?
I have been wearing this surgical mask for 2 days.
I'm on the third day of using my N95.
They've been delivering for years 10 to 20,000 masks, okay.
How do we go from 10,000 masks
to 300,000?
I'll tell you how as a healthcare worker, because we have a pandemic.
The richest country in the Western world
in 2020.
The strongest economy in the world.
This is actual real life in the hospital now. They give you a paper bag.
Paper bag where I store a face shield and an N95 mask.
And I have to bring it to and from work every day. Do you think that that sounds safe?
Clean it between patients. Use it until it breaks. Unacceptable.
Especially because I am 16 weeks pregnant.
We're delivering millions and millions of different products, and all we do is hear that, can you get some more?
To say that we are not using our masks correctly or that we're hoarding them.
I don't think it's hoarding. I think it's maybe worse than hoarding.
That's completely preposterous.
What we're seeing hospital workers do is actually going out and finding protective equipment in whatever possible way we can.
When you are intubating a patient, particles from the patient are released into the air, and it becomes increasingly dangerous for anybody that's in the immediate vicinity.
Without this PPE, we won't need the ventilators because none of us will be around to run them.
We're at risk. The patients are at risk. Our families who we're going home to, they're at risk. The grocery store clerks that I go buy my groceries from, they're at risk.
We need proper PPE and we need supplies of it today. Not next week, not in 2 weeks, not in a month. We need it now.
I'm not going to give up, no matter what. I still love my job, and I'm going to do everything in my power to save lives.
President Trump, at some point you're going to face the end of your own life. Think about how you should be treating the people who are going to be taking care of you.
We shouldn't be losing talented healthcare workers because of a lack of protective equipment when people are just showing up trying to do their job. It's wrong. We should all be ashamed that it's happening.
I would like to begin by announcing some important developments in our war against the Chinese virus.
Why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China. I want to be accurate. The Obama administration made a decision on testing that turned out to be very detrimental. Many administrations preceded me. For the most part, they did very little. World Health Organization, they called it wrong. They missed the call. Like in Illinois, the governor couldn't do his job with Governor Cuomo. He had a chance to order 16,000 ventilators 2 years ago, and he turned it down. He turned down the chance. Now, he can't be blaming us. I talk about the Chinese virus, and I mean it. That's where it came from. It comes from China. Certainly, the world is paying a big price for what they did. 10 to 20,000 masks to 300,000. Something's going on. Where are the masks going? Are they going out the back door?
You did disband the White House Pandemic Office.
When you say me, I didn't do it. We have a group of people. I could ask perhaps in my administration, but I could perhaps ask Tony about that because I don't know anything about it. I mean, you say we. Today, I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted to assess the World Health Organization's role in severely mismanaging and covering up the spread of the coronavirus.
I'd like to just ask the Chinese for a formal apology. This coronavirus originated in China, and I have not heard one word from the Chinese. A simple I'm sorry.
All these different horrible diseases, they seem to come with a name with a location. And this was Chinese virus. But I don't have to say it if they feel so strongly about it. We'll see.
This is the Wuhan coronavirus that's caused this, and the information that we got at the front end of this thing wasn't perfect and has led us now to a place where much of the challenge we face today is put us behind the curve.
Remember, nobody knew what this was at the beginning. And yes, there was a cluster of strange pneumonia clusters and infections and so on, but nobody at that stage realised that it was particularly significant. It took a little time to develop. So what happens is that once we understood what we were dealing with, then we started to test and to check across a broader range of criteria, and that meant that the numbers rose quickly. Now remember, China's not the only group in this situation. So just recently, France suddenly increased its number of reports because up until then, it had not counted deaths that had occurred in outside of hospitals. It only counted hospital deaths. Once it started counting deaths in nursing homes, the numbers increased dramatically. Some people insist on calling this a China virus or a Wuhan virus or something similar. And there is an increasing idea that somehow China is responsible for all of this. We need to remember that although this outbreak appears to have started in Wuhan, it could just as easily have started in any other place where there is human and animal contact. Western nations knew after Chinese New Year the impact that COVID was having, the lockdown in Wuhan, etc. They knew this was a serious problem. So why were they not prepared? They knew what was happening. China wasn't covering up. And in fact, China let the genome of COVID virus be known internationally as soon as it was known within China. So there was no withholding of information. And in fact, WHO has praised China for its degree of disclosure and its sharing with the global scientific community. Western nations are eager to blame someone for their own mistakes. America in particular, they knew about this in mid-January, but they really did nothing until they started to see an increase in infections. The same with Italy. Italy was well aware of the situation in China. It was world news. It was headlines for days and days and days. And yet, many countries sat back and said, oh no, we don't need to really worry about this. It's purely a Chinese problem. So it's very important not to blame China for mistakes that Western countries have made themselves.
China doesn't need to ask to be praised. It was not. It is not. That's the truth, the whole truth. I don't know why you said only WHO or few agencies, but almost all member states were praising China for what it did.
Late last night, I had a very good talk with President Xi, and we talked mostly about the coronavirus. They're working really hard, and I think they're doing a very professional job.
I think they've handled it professionally, and I think President Xi is extremely capable, and I hope that it's going to be resolved.
You probably saw Starbucks are now opened again. Apple is back to normal in terms of production in their facilities in China. They've made a lot of progress.
Do you see the data China has been sharing with the United States has been helpful?
I think it has been helpful. We've been working very much with China. We are sharing data, yes. In fact, we're sharing quite a bit of data.
China took action massively at the epicenter, at the source of the outbreak. It's a shutdown of the Wuhan city, and that helped in preventing cases from being exported to other provinces in China and the rest of the world. We should tell the truth, and that's the truth.
Focus of all political parties should be to save their people. Please don't politicize this virus. It exploits the differences you have at the national level. If you want to be exploited, and if you want to have many more body bags, then you do it. If you don't want many more body bags, then you refrain from politicizing it. The focus of all political parties should be to save their people. Please don't politicize this virus. It exploits the differences you have at the national level. If you want to be exploited, And if you want to have many more body bags, then you do it. If you don't want many more body bags, then you refrain from politicizing it. My short message is, please quarantine politicizing COVID. The unity of your country will be very important to defeat this dangerous virus. No need to use COVID to score political punches. No need. You have many other ways to prove yourselves. This is not the one to use for politics. It's like playing with fire.
They missed the call. They could have called it months earlier. They would have known.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus. The main reason for this declaration is not because of what is happening in China, but because of what is happening in other countries.
We have very little problem in this country at this moment, 5, and those people are all recuperating successfully. But we're working very closely with China and other countries, and we think it's going to have a very good ending for us, so that I can assure you.
The detection of this small number of cases could be the spark that becomes a bigger fire.
The virus. They're working hard. Looks like by April, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away. I hope that's true.
If we don't use the window of opportunity we have now, if we don't operate with a sense of urgency, there could be a serious consequence. It's not either or. We must focus on containment while doing everything we can to prepare for a potential pandemic. Every country needs to be ready to detect cases early, to isolate patients, trace contacts, provide quality clinical care. We're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Nicole, the what should he have known question is the most problematic for the president, because when you start scratching that surface and you bring up the facts, you understand that we lost our CDC representative in Beijing just a couple of months before the outbreak of the case. You understand that when he starts pointing to China as that scapegoat he's so desperate to find, we understand that there were reports to the State Department from our own embassy in Beijing that problems were occurring in the Wuhan lab. We understand when he points to the WHO, the World Health Organization, as the cause of all of this for failing to warn him. We learn what? U.S. citizens, officials stationed at the World Health Organization were sending warning flags to Washington, right? So what are we seeing now? We're seeing a desperate search for a scapegoat, and we're seeing a president, as he ramps up toward an election and his poll numbers are down, is going to be increasingly desperate to find that scapegoat. But every time he points at one, it points right back at his administration that either can't message him correctly, his own economic advisors, his own intelligence community, all giving him memos, briefs, emails that we've got a threat coming at us, and he's not heeding the warning. So
the blame game between the USA and China is escalating. We've now got a longtime critic of China, who's also a White House advisor, saying that China is profiteering from the pandemic. He put forward the claim that China worked to hide it along with the World Health Organization while stockpiling the supplies that would soon be in high demand.
First of all, the virus was spawned in China. Second of all, they hid the virus behind the shield of the World Health Organization. The third thing they did was basically hoard personal protective equipment, and now they're profiteering from it.
With the pandemic overwhelming America, officials on Capitol Hill soon found the scapegoat that they could pin it on.
If it was a mistake is a mistake. But if they were knowingly responsible, then there should be consequences.
China is the largest state sponsor of pandemics. This is the third or fourth pandemic that came out of China. What should we do to the largest state sponsor of pandemics on the globe? We should sanction China.
China's attempt to control basically every organization within the United Nations through their colonial powers, through bribery, through other things, tremendous damage to this country and to this world.
China has long been the most significant geopolitical threat the United States faces.
Trump even promoted the conspiracy theory that the virus originated in a virus lab in China's Wuhan.
A lot of people are looking at it. It seems to make sense. They talk about a certain kind of bat, but that bat wasn't in that area.
Officials in the city of Wuhan are adamant that this is simply not the case.
WHO officials have repeatedly stated that there isn't any evidence the new coronavirus was produced in a laboratory. Many well-known medical experts in the world also believe the so-called laboratory leak hypothesis has no scientific basis.
Although that conspiracy theory wouldn't exactly win the United States points. Let's remember that lab actually received a grant from none other than the United States itself.
The Obama administration gave them a grant of $3.7 million. I've been hearing about that. And we've instructed that if any grants are going to that area, we're looking at it literally about an hour ago and also early in the morning.
U.S. officials have glossed over this fact. It barely was mentioned during a press conference. And now, despite the fact that there's no real evidence, Donald Trump says an investigation is going on into the laboratory.
A lot of strange things are happening, but there is a lot of investigation going on, and we're going to find out.
Conspiracy theories used to justify U.S. foreign policy rarely require evidence for the U.S. media to run with them and for the U.S. public to become convinced. Now, calls for China to be sanctioned over the virus are growing not just in the United States, but around the world. An Israeli NGO recommends suing China. Australian and Canadian politicians are jumping on the anti-China bandwagon as well. This, as so many countries around the world are depending on China for personal protective equipment.
Tensions have been pretty high with China for some time, and I do fear that this is making it worse. Certainly it could result in more economic warfare against China. As everyone knows, the U.S. has the most cases of COVID-19 in the world, has the most number of deaths from COVID-19. Those numbers will continue to go up. It's clear that the reason this has happened is because, number one, Trump waited 6 weeks before doing anything to confront the crisis, and because even to this moment, we're not testing nearly enough people for the virus. So this is a homegrown catastrophe, but the government doesn't want to admit that, so it's trying to find a scapegoat in China.
President Trump now tells us China is to blame for the havoc that the coronavirus is wreaking across the world. He's paused funding to the World Health Organization because he says it colluded with China in keeping the facts hidden. To evaluate these claims, just keep in mind one tweet from the president on January 24th. China has been working very hard to contain the coronavirus. The United States greatly appreciates their efforts and transparency. It will all work out well. In particular, on behalf of the American people, I want to thank President Xi. What did the world, including President Trump, know about the virus at that point? Well, one day earlier, on January 23rd, the World Health Organization warned all countries should be prepared for containment of the virus, including active surveillance, early detection, isolation, and case management, contact tracing and prevention of onward spread, unquote. By this point, stories about the virus were all over the news. China had announced that the virus was being transmitted between humans and had begun locking down parts of Hubei province. As for the US government, on January 18th, a week earlier, Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar had briefed Trump on the dangers of the virus, according to the Washington Post. By January 24th, there were 2 confirmed cases of the disease in the US, and on January 27th, the Centers for Disease Control issued a level 3 warning to avoid non-essential travel to China. On January 29th, Trump tweeted, "Just received a briefing on the coronavirus in China from all our great agencies who are also working closely with China." That very day, one of Trump's most trusted aides, Peter Navarro, wrote a memo warning about a possible pandemic that could kill up to 500,000 Americans. Navarro noted that Chinese reports indicated that the virus was likely far more contagious than the flu, more like the bubonic plague or smallpox. The next day, January 30th, the WHO declared a global public health emergency. Just hours after that, this is what Trump said.
Now we're working very strongly with China on the coronavirus. We think it's going to have a very good ending for us.
So the question is, was Donald Trump telling the truth about China then, or is he telling the truth about it now? But none of that changes the fact that Donald Trump was well aware of the potential dangers of the virus by late January at minimum and by mid-February at the latest. He made a judgment that the virus would not be a big problem for America, that it would go away in April with warm weather. He apparently worried that taking any strong actions against it would spook the stock market. It is those misjudgments that have significantly worsened the COVID-19 crisis in America. Now, to deflect blame from himself, President Trump has decided to bash China. This compounds one bad policy with another. Whatever China's mistakes, missteps, and deceptions, the fastest way to defeat this pandemic would be to build a broad international alliance, to pool resources, share information, and coordinate actions. Right now, Washington is doing the opposite, restricting trade in key supplies, allegedly outbidding other countries for shipments of PPE, and acting without even consulting with its closest allies. China, meanwhile, has tried to scrub its own record by floating a conspiracy theory that the US military created the outbreak in Wuhan. It has also tried to burnish its image by doing undeniably good things, like lending its expertise to countries around the world and sending supplies to hard-hit places such as Iran, Italy, Spain, and the United States. During the Cold War, when the United States and the Soviet Union were mortal rivals, they still cooperated on a campaign to vaccinate the world and eradicate smallpox. Now we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and the US and China, the world's 2 leading powers, are trading insults and one-upping each other in a childish blame game that will not save one human life anywhere.
I spoke today on the phone with the Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang. We both agreed that the fight against coronavirus is a global one and that we need to support each other in times of need. China has not forgotten that in January, when China was the center of the virus outbreak, the European Union helped. We donated rapidly more than 50 tons of protective equipment. I remember very well my phone call with the Chinese Prime Minister in those days. Today, we are the center of the coronavirus pandemic, and we need protective equipment ourselves. We are ramping up our production, we're converting new production lines, but this needs several weeks. And in the meantime, we are grateful for support from China. The Prime Minister announced that China is ready to provide 200,000 N95 masks, 2 million surgical masks, and 50,000 testing kits. These can be shipped to Europe immediately. Our Commissioner and the Chinese Trade Minister are implementing this. This support is highly valued and we are grateful for it.
This is a right-wing political narrative or story from those who are already enemies of China. So it's not unusual that these sorts of people will find fault with China no matter what China does. Will China's actions expand its influence? Yes, certainly. But remember, the United States could do exactly the same if it was just as generous with its aid and support as China is. China has shared all of its clinical treatment notes, all the experience of doctors and nurses, paramedics, everybody, as to how to identify, how to deal, how we work with it in China. Now it's up to the world to decide if they want to accept some of that or not. At the G20 meeting, they refused to lift sanctions that would allow the supply of medical goods. That's not cooperation. That's not a global approach. And yet, these are the same people who will be the first to use masks made in China when the time becomes necessary. So it's part of an ongoing political narrative that's been there before. They are using COVID as an excuse to push that agenda harder and faster. And it is a concern because when people are frightened, when they're worried, then they're more susceptible to this type of story. The best thing that China can do is to continue what it's doing at the moment, which is being generous in sharing its knowledge, generous in sharing its aid, generous in sharing its information. And yes, this will benefit China, there is no question, because China will be seen as stepping up while others have been stepping down. It's the best that China can do. And that's the key factor. It is open, it is transparent in what is happening in terms of controlling COVID within the China environment and sharing that information with the world scientific and medical community.
And countries like China have shown that sticking harder to that strategy has resulted in benefits. China have definitely offered support, and we're working in a tripartite with China to look at the supply, particularly of things like PPE, ventilators and other issues. But obviously that's a work in progress. But again, we thank China for its solidarity in trying to prioritise supply chains to a country like Italy and to countries like Iran. They clearly are willing to discuss with WHO and coordinate with WHO where the best targets are for the surplus equipment they may have. And, you know, China has been through it and there's not that much surplus, but they are willing, very, very willing to work with us to see where that's most needed, and we're grateful for that.
It's a matter of will. It's a matter of how do we use our best efforts to drive this down. There's no excuse to say that we cannot do this. Countries themselves have shown that they are able to do this, and we must push countries, all of us, to fight as hard as they can to suppress this virus, because by doing so, you are saving lives. By doing so, you are buying more time for your hospitals to prepare. Having a large number of hospitals overwhelm your ICU is incredibly damaging, and more people will die. So do everything that you can to be as aggressive as you can in these early cases.
So let me thank you for the opportunity to talk about the biggest international story of your professional lifetime, which is also the most important international challenge the world will face for as far as the eye can see. The story, of course, is the rise of China. Never before have so many people risen so far, so fast, on so many different dimensions. The challenge is the impact of China's rise. The discombobulation this will cause the United States and the international order of which the U.S. has been the principal architect and guardian. The past 100 years have been what historians now call an American century. Americans have become accustomed to their place at the top of every pecking order. So the very idea of another country that could be as big and strong as the U.S. or bigger strikes many Americans as an assault on who they are. So let's try this. The quiz. Time out. Pop quiz. Question. 40 years ago, 1978, China sets out on its march to the market. At that point, what percentage of China's 1 billion citizens were struggling to survive on less than $2 a day? Take a guess. 25%? 50? 75? 90. What do you think? 90. 9 out of every 10 on less than $2 a day. 2018, 40 years later, what about the numbers? What's your bet? Take a look. Fewer than 1 in 100 today. And China's president has promised that within the next 3 years, those last tens of millions will have been raised up above that threshold. So it's a miracle, actually, in our lifetime. Hard to believe, but brute facts are even harder to ignore. A nation that didn't even appear on any of the international league tables 25 years ago has soared to rival and in some areas surpass the United States. Thus the challenge that'll shape our world. A seemingly unstoppable rising China, accelerating towards an apparently immovable ruling U.S., on course for what could be the grandest collision in history. So, as we saw with this flipping the pyramid of poverty, China has actually soared. It's meteoric. Former Czech President Václav Havel, I think, put it best. He said, all this has happened so fast, we haven't yet had time to be astonished. Okay. To remind myself how astonished I should be, I occasionally look out the window in my office in Cambridge at this bridge which goes across the Charles River between the Kennedy School and Harvard Business School. In 2012, the state of Massachusetts said they were going to renovate this bridge. It would take 2 years. In 2014, they said it wasn't finished. In 2015, they said it would take 1 more year. In 2015, they said it's not finished. We're not going to tell you when it's going to be finished. Finally, last year it was finished 3 times over budget. Now, compare this to a similar bridge that I drove across last month in Beijing. It's called the Shenyang Bridge. In 2015, the Chinese decided they wanted to renovate that bridge. It actually has twice as many lanes of traffic. How long did it take for them to complete the project? 2015. What do you bet? Take a guess. Okay. Take a look. The answer is 43 hours. Now, of course, that couldn't happen in New York, yes. Okay. Behind this speed and execution is a purpose-driven leader and a government that works. The most ambitious and most competent leader on the international stage today is China's President Xi Jinping. And he's made no secret about what he wants. As he said when he became president 6 years ago, his goal is to make China great again. A banner he raised long before Donald Trump picked up a version of this. Okay. To that end, Xi Jinping has announced specific targets for specific dates: 2025, 2035, 2049. By 2025, China means to be the dominant power in the major market in 10 leading technologies, including driverless cars, robots, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. By 2035, China means to be the innovation leader across all the advanced technologies. And by 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic, China means to be unambiguously number one, including, as Xi Jinping, an army that he calls, quote, fight and win. So these are audacious goals, but as you can see, China's already well on its way to these objectives. And we should remember how fast our world is changing. 30 years ago, the World Wide Web had not yet even been invented. Who'll feel the impact of this rise of China most directly? Obviously, the current number one. As China gets bigger and stronger and richer, technologically more advanced, it'll inevitably bump up against American positions and prerogatives. Now, for red-blooded Americans, and especially for red-necked Americans like me, I'm from North Carolina, there's something wrong with this picture. Okay? The USA means number one. That's who we are. But again, to repeat, brute facts are hard to ignore. 4 years ago, Senator John McCain asked me to testify about this to his Senate Senate Armed Services Committee. And so I made for them a chart that you can see that said, compare the US and China to kids on opposite ends of a seesaw on a playground, each represented by the size of their economy. As late as 2004, China was just half our size. By 2014, its GDP was equal to ours. And on the current trajectory, by 2024, it'll be half again larger. The consequences of this tectonic change will be felt everywhere. For example, in the current trade conflict, China is already the number one trading partner of all the major Asian countries.
I also made another prediction 6 years and a half ago. I said the United States and China both need political reforms. But in the case of China, small reforms have been going on all the time in the political system. We fix problems here and there. But I said, problem is the United States. Your political system was a product of pre-industrial era. And I made a forecast. I said, without significant, substantial political reform, my concern is in your next elections, you may produce a leader worse off than George W. Bush.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Get easy, just relax. That's really bad reporting. All these empty, these in-between chairs. Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all. I think we've done a great job.
This is yet another attempt to impeach the president. And sadly, it seems they care very little for any of the destruction they are leaving in their wake. We must test for the virus in order to stop the spread of it. What could be a very great recession. Some predicting even a depression.
At worst case scenario, it could be the flu.
I feel like the more I learn about this, the less there is to worry about.
I was about to say the same thing. We don't have immunity to this virus. It's a new virus. It's a pandemic strain of a virus we haven't seen before.
All the talk about coronavirus being so much more deadly doesn't reflect reality. Without a vaccine, the flu would be far more deadly.
We are facing an incredibly contagious and dangerous virus that is moving across the world from one hotspot to another.
We're going to call out anyone and everyone who's using this virus as a political weapon against the president. The standard flu every single year kills tens of thousands of Americans. We are now entering what will be the crucial defining 15-day period as it relates to this virus, where we must slow the spread of coronavirus.
It's actually the safest time to fly. Everyone I know that's flying right now, terminals are pretty much dead. We have a responsibility to slow down this virus and to think of other people during this time. And so if you can keep your distance and prevent someone from getting close to you that might be sick, you can save your family, you can save the elderly, and help our country as a nation.
It is absolutely disgusting that Democrats are seeking to use this complex virus to score cheap political points. This dangerous health crisis could dovetail quickly into a political crisis, already feeling economic ramifications of it all.
America is not prepared. The nurses are not being I quit my job today. I needed to work and I was assigned to a COVID patient on an ICU unit that has been converted to a designated COVID unit. None of the nurses are wearing masks, not even surgical masks in the hallways. They're giving reports to each other. I had my own N95 mask. I told my manager, I understand we're short on supplies, but let me protect myself. Let me feel safe. I have family that I have to come home to, and the way things are looking, this isn't gonna get any better. America is not prepared, and nurses are not being protected.